There we go. All right. All right, you should be host now.
All right. Let's see if I can find my PowerPoint. So. Bear with me a moment. It's not letting me find my PowerPoint. There it is. Good. You guys see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'll try to keep this as informal as possible, but certainly stop me and ask questions if you have any. I'll go through this fairly quickly. I only have like 15 slides or less, and most of them I don't need to go into major detail on, but this was a presentation we've shared with City Council, with our Planning and Zoning Commission as well. But as you guys are all aware, I'm sure at this point, we do have some sewer challenges in Cabarrus County, and that's all of Cabarrus County, not just Kannapolis. And then, of course, as we were just talking about just before we started the meeting, North Mecklenburg is in that mix as well, because they get part of the allocation from Wasac. That occurred way back in 2004 when Plant 4 site actually closed down, and that allocation was sold from the mill owners to Charlotte. So they're in the mix as well, Mecklenburg County. So, but without further ado, I'll run through my PowerPoint here. We do have it set up where we're on the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County. That's been an arrangement that's been in effect now probably over 20 years. The Rocky River Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant is the facility that we send our sewer to from Kannapolis. We are near capacity. That was realized last January, I guess, and then they proactively started looking at expansions. I came on board with City back in May of last year and was on a committee that started identifying what could be done here. It's one of those things I feel like maybe we could have had reaction quicker, but that's neither here nor there now. At this point, we have to just address what's the problem. So we have 3 expansions that are in the works with the facility at Wasac, one being 2024, the other one being 2026, 27, and then another one after 2027. So you may hear me refer to folks or somebody you may have call me about a project they're looking at. They may be post 2027. That's for that last expansion. I will tell you the 2024 expansion, as far as Kannapolis's capacity, is pretty much close to used up, and 2027 is getting very close to that as well. But it's not all bleak. And as you'll see from this, we try to be as methodical as possible to help prioritize projects that we have in the works, but also try to give some priority to some that may be pending or hoping to do something in the city in the very near future. So historically, Wasac has allowed capacity, basically, or allocation, I should say, on a first come, first serve basis. That's changed as a result of this constrained environment that we're in, finding ourselves in at this point. We've got a new agreement that actually allocates current future capacity to Concord, Kannapolis, Harrisburg, and Mount Pleasant based on our flow averages, and we're right at 30% of that total. You may be asking why Midland's not in that. They actually get their capacity directly from Concord, so their portion of that's in the Concord portion. So any questions before I proceed? And certainly, I think most of you guys know how to raise your hands on the screen or whatever too. Certainly do that, and I'll try to catch you if I don't miss anybody or anything like that. All right, next one is current capacity estimates. This is something that actually is a little better than what you see on the screen now. We're closer to probably about 700,000 gallons per day. That's based on sure up numbers we got back in January. Again, you know, I'm very optimistic, but at the same time cautious about that, because we do have a lot of that obligated at this point, as you'll see as I go further into the slides here. But that kind of gives you an idea of our future capacities. I won't read each bullet off to you, but it kind of gives you an idea of where we're at and how much we use and where those numbers go and everything too. So again, we've tried to be very intentional about how we're allocating for these. So we're going about it with what we have that we know that's in the works and those kind of things too. We have 25 development projects that have city commitments. What that means is we either own the properties or we've invested a great deal of tax monies, infrastructure funds, those kind of things. So we're committed.
So no kidding. And you sure she looked in her shed? Because they had their big barn open a couple days.
There we go. All right. So the other part of that is we are actually, in addition to the projects that have city commitment, we had 21 additional projects that have no commitments, but want to move ahead. That number is fluctuating right now because we have some developers, not many, not as many as I thought would, basically saying maybe they'll pull themselves out of the mix for the time being and come back in the foreseeable future for allocation there. So, but those numbers that I'm sharing with you, as mentioned in 3, does not include what may be proposed over the next 5 years. And we still, I can tell you, my planning staff, there's 9 of us on staff. I've got 1 opening. I'm trying to fill as quick as I can. We're not at a shortage of activity that's occurring, even with this going on. You would think there would be a slowdown, but there hasn't been, based on projects that were either pending or smaller developments occurring as well. So, but our overall capacity is at that 2.15 million gallons per day capacity, which is basically, you know, it's hitting pretty tight there, and especially when we only have the 700,000 that I mentioned earlier there. So, oops, I jumped ahead. Sorry about that. All right, so we're trying to, the policy that council adopted back in December was trying to balance out things of what we have out there to public interest and still allow development to occur. One thing I probably should emphasize and should have mentioned probably at the beginning of this, we've told folks we don't have a moratorium. There is no total halt to growth. It is experiencing a little bit of a slowdown, but only to the effect of folks trying to figure out what capacity is available and what they can get. That said, as you guys know, the market's really hot and folks are trying to do what they can within the current constraints and such too. So the scope of the policy that council adopted back in December is tied to an interlocal agreement. It does go with those 4 phases I mentioned to you earlier, the 2024 expansion, 2027, and a future date. The spreadsheet I'll share with you in a minute, it's available on the city's website, actually has the projects with allocation, with some this year, 2022, some 2024, some 2027, and then some post 2027 for that last expansion. There's a lot of moving parts to this. We do have legislators involved with this as well, trying to expedite the actual expansions so that they don't have to go through the typical bureaucratic process, if you will, where it's a little more fast track. As you can imagine, those kind of expansions have environmental implications. But there's some parts of that unfortunately just get caught up in the bureaucracy and get slowed down. So that's what some of the legislatures are working on to try to help that further along in the process a little quicker than normal. What typically takes 3 years, they think they can narrow down between 18 months to a year, but I don't know if that's going to help us or not. And a lot of things still have to be kind of buttoned down for that to occur. So on the policy itself, it's basically geared toward folks getting a permit through our office. I'm the administrator of this policy, if you will, in addition to the other things that we deal with on planning, zoning side, subdivision, commercial site plans, those kind of things. We now have the sewer allocation permits, and that helps folks realize what capacity they have. Again, smaller builders, smaller developers aren't being affected as much from this, but there is an effect from it. And the reason I say that, a lot of the developers, the smaller developers, know how to do 1 and 2 lots here and there kind of thing too. And those still have capacity because they're basically under radar as far as their impact goes, but we're still tracking them. So.
Hey, Richard.
All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
On your last slide, you said that basically the infill builders that are on existed recorded lots. So if they get it, somebody gets an acre of land, they can't subdivide that, or they're going to go to the back of the line. Is that what we're understanding? But if they got a 50 by 100 lot, then they can, and that's platted, they can go ahead and build on that.
Well, so there's a couple things to your question there. So let me break it out. So basically, if there's an existing lot that's either vacant or someone tearing a house down, they can get sewer capacity on the existing lot that existed prior to the policy adoption back in December. If someone wants to split a lot, in the example that you gave there, if it's an acre or anything around that, and they're going to split it, they would still get capacity because under state law, they're exempt. So anything that's 2 acres or less, they can split up to 3 lots and still get capacity. And we have a lot of developers, again, small developers that are doing that, and they're seeing that that's a good approach to the infill developments occurring too. So as you can see, That's certainly not going to kill the growth. It may slow some down on the larger developments, but it's not on those situations. So,
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
sure, yes, sir. Good question too. All right, so a couple of things. Again, I won't go too far in the weeds on these, but just so you guys know, the prioritization and that we've tried to operate transparently and with some kind of method involved, method to the madness, if you will. The overall policy covers 4 categories. Those that you see listed on that screen there, the 9, 8 of those 9 are actually city-owned property. So that's why they were given priority. So we can go ahead and make sure the tax situation on those are moved ahead and such too. Kannapolis Crossing was a legislative annexation. That's the new interchange up off of Old Beatty Ford Road. So that's why that one was given priority in that particular example there. But those are projects that were prior city commitments. We were further along in the commitment process on how much money was out there. So they were far enough along that we had to commit the sewer to those. Again, they don't take up a tremendous amount in the bigger scheme of things, but right now with what we have in our current allocation, yes, it's more than half of that. So that's kind of keep that in mind. Strategic reserve, other projects that may especially have economic impacts. We've got several listed there. City investments on debt. Downtown, of course, is a big one. Economic development projects that are out there. Infill development and affordable housing. So on those last 2, so the example for what Chris just asked there for something that would be over the 2 acres, but not more than 20 lots, that would be considered an infill development. We actually have a call for projects out right now for that. That developers have until the 31st of this month to submit something asking for that allocation. And the same for the affordable housing was a call for projects as well. And that deadline is also 31st, and we'll make a decision by the end of April on those projects. May have 1 or 2 that's going to submit for affordable housing from what I'm hearing. Infill development, maybe a handful, probably less than a dozen, if that, that will submit for that. So, and again, that's based off of some of the capacity we have that we know that's out there, but it's not going to be a big hit. So that's why we're able to prioritize those projects if folks are wanting to or willing to commit to compete for those. Previously approved projects, which is something council took action on at their February 28th meeting. 14 of those 16 projects I've got listed there were given allocation, the other 2 being affordable housing type projects that were told basically come back and submit under this and compete with other projects. So 14 projects that already had preliminary approval are moving ahead. Irish Creek subdivision out near the golf course is one of them. We've got several that are pretty much scattered about the city. We got some on Ridge Avenue townhomes. Concord Lake Road, multifamily over there. We have some that are again scattered about throughout the city. You'll have projects there. We did have a project on Lane Street that's a multifamily project that didn't make this cut, so they're going to have to wait till 2027 or post 2027 for that multifamily development there. But the developers still staying committed and hoping for some type of allocation maybe before that time frame. But you know, it's just one of those things whether or not they make the cut at some point. Then the last category, as far as the overall priority projects, is the waiting list. There's almost 20 projects that are on that list itself that were in the process of looking to get approvals, but they did not get the preliminary approval. So they had to make that list of 16 that I mentioned earlier that was pared down to 14. So these folks are letting us know whether or not they want to keep your name in the hat and kind of going from there. Now, I will tell you that City Council reviews this policy every 6 months is how it's set up, which ideally would be January, February, and then July, August timeframe. Those numbers coincide with when we actually have sure up numbers from WASAC on how much rainfall they've got and how much that affects the sewer allocations for each jurisdiction and so forth, without going too scientific on you guys with that, but I'm boring you with the details. 4 factors actually determine allocation permits there. It's basically, the thing I could probably emphasize most is quality of development. So this actually is skewed toward if a developer is not just going to track build, if they're going to do better quality type projects where they include some type of green space that's over and above what the ordinance requires. They're going to have some masonry accents on houses or build masonry. That helps their projects score better than other ones that may not. But that's a quick list reference on that. And that's somewhat scientific as well. But again, one of those things that we set up to kind of help prioritize projects as they come in. And I won't get into the detail of these next couple of slides. It just basically tells you what the scoring matrix is and kind of where we're at with that. We score that as city staff. We allow the developers to score their projects, and then we compare notes and then come to a happy median on that as far as what is a comparison. And then they have, as you see from the slide there, they have 128 days to get their allocation permit. And then they have basically 180 days to do something on the project, which means build some type of footing on at least 2 projects, get permitting for that. So they can show that they're moving ahead and not tying up allocation that someone else could possibly use. So it kind of helps us prioritize those things. About to the last slide here, but I'm actually the one that administers the policy with my staff. We actually, the matrix, we had no appeals on that. Developers felt like it was transparent, felt like it gave them the information they needed to move ahead in these trying times. And these are uncharted territories for all of us, myself included, in our staff. And plenty of developers that have never dealt with these type of sewer constraints. So the policy itself is effective upon adoption, which was back in December. It has been amended twice since then because it's meant to be that, so that council can say, okay, there's certain projects that we didn't give enough for, so maybe we need to allocate it. And there's some that maybe we gave too much for, so we need to take them out. They're making it as fluid as possible. So that's why they're reviewing. I expect probably another amendment to occur, not at this March 28th meeting, but probably sometime early April at that meeting, just to again shore up the numbers. The other thing I'll stop my share here and then try to share again with you guys on is, if I can get this to come up. So you'll see something to this nature if you go to the city's website. Can you guys see the spreadsheet? I mean, yeah, the spreadsheet I've got up there.
I do.
Okay, good. I thought I saw Chris shaking his head, but I wasn't certain there. So, all right. So that spreadsheet basically gives all those things I just listed there in color coding and priority order of projects. So those top ones are the city commitments. The next set of green ones are the strategic reserve. And then the next group that's in that, I don't even know what you call that color. It's kind of a pinkish color there, but that's the list of the 14 projects that made the cut for the allocation that had been given some type of preliminary approval. You'll see the phasing over there to the right, 2022 allocation. Most of them got allocation in 2022, with the rest getting some in 2024 and spacing it out. We had some projects we went in, as you can see, even on the strategic reserve projects, they were spread out over the next 5 years or so, because we know some of those projects won't be online, so they shouldn't have an effect on 2022 and 2024 to the full amount. So that way we can fairly equitably distribute that among other projects. And then go down the list here, we have other projects that were some type of city commitment there. We also have the waiting list I mentioned earlier. I don't think I have it on this particular spreadsheet. Actually, it is. So those lists there, about 17, 18 projects, so close to 20 projects there. They have no capacity through 2027. They're all looking at post 2027. That's what this column here is that I've got my cursor on. So they have some time to wait. Most of them aren't giving up. I will have, like, say, the case of Sudbury here. That was an MI project. MI decided to give it up, but we have folks looking at that may still be interested in doing something out there and willing to wait if they can get their investors to, hold the line, if you will, or if they've got the money invested that they can do it, because that's an ideal location. It's just a matter of, do they want to wait until post 2027 to get the sewer on that project? So the spreadsheet that I'm showing to you now is the working document I have, but on the city's website, you guys see the website showing up there? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yes, no, let me try it again. All right, so you should see the city website now. I think I see it on Chris's screen now. And if you go under government and departments, look like there's a slight delay. So when it turns over there, but go under the planning department there. You'll see my mugshot on the right there. If you go down on the what's new on that page there, what Kannapolis water allocation policy, and highlighting there. So if you click on that, that's the actual policy. I don't know if you guys want to get into that level of detail, but that pretty much covers what I hit on the PowerPoint there. That covers the policy in detail. And it's not a very long policy, 9 pages, but it's something we had to come up with fairly quickly to address the constraints here. The main thing most folks want to see on this particular page as it relates to sewer allocation is this particular bullet here, the second one down there is highlighted. What wastewater allocation policy exhibit A. That's the list of projects that have some type of capacity that I just shared with you on the other spreadsheet. This is the one that's officially approved right now for city council. The amendments coming up will actually probably shore up some of these numbers where one or two developers said, hey, maybe we wait a little bit. So if they're going to wait, then we'll put it out and not take up someone else's allocation. There's a couple projects that the amount of bedrooms that we were showing was higher than what they had anticipated. So they're going to bring those numbers down and help their allocation as well. So that's kind of sure enough that you'll see on the amendments, and why city council has set it up where it's a working document that will kind of amend as needed as this thing goes on. And again, we still have those dates of every 6 months, looking at the policy and shoring it up as well, in addition to it being a council working document that they can amend as they see fit there. So, Chris, with that, I think that's pretty much all I had there. I don't want to go into too much details. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I have a tendency to do that, but certainly be glad to answer any questions you guys have or bring up anything you saw there that you might want to see further.
Chris, I've got one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Conrad Haywood. How are you?
Good. Hope you are.
Good, good. Just want a little clarification. I've got a 10-acre tract in Kannapolis. The developer's wanting to develop. It's sold right now 2 houses per acre. Don't know that they would ever get 20 in there. But would that be a waiver, or could they get a permit, I guess, to build those homes and put city water, city sewer? There already is city water, city sewer on the property. So I guess if they build, let's say the 10 acres, 15 homes, can they connect?
So what they would need to do, Connor, is compete under that infill development category I gave you there. The call for projects is on the city website under where I just showed you the picture of where the policy is at. There's 2 call for projects. One's for affordable housing. The other one's for just infill type development. That's 20 lots or less. Most likely, if they compete, get it in by the 31st of March, they would probably make the cut, because there's not a lot of folks that seem to be competing for that. If they don't make this cut, there's a good possibility that'll be back out there after July when council looks at this again, so they can still compete as well.
Okay, so they could get on if they submit plans by the end of the month. If not, they'll have to wait till the end of July.
Right. So they probably still wouldn't be pushed out post 2027. There's hopes since it's a smaller development. So, but we just have to analyze it after they submit it for that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody in here got questions for Richard? Hey, Richard, I'm going to have this conversation because we just had it earlier before our meeting. How does I saw affordable housing on there? How is that defined by the city?
So we're going by what the state and federal government says on that. So it's basically the 80% of the market value, and we unfortunately at this time have to include ourselves in the Charlotte numbers. So as you and I know, certainly Charlotte numbers and what's affordable there is not what's affordable in Kannapolis. But I will tell you, the 2 projects that may be competing for this have some type of state funding that ties them to a lower price to match for affordable housing. So that kind of helps that number come down a little bit. So, but again, it can be skewed because we are in the Charlotte region, and that has an effect on what the overall price is. So, I listened to something about 2 weeks ago in Charlotte and the west side where they're redeveloping, and affordable housing over there is like over $400,000, $500,000 houses, and that's absurd, of course. So,
are those single family houses, or are they multifamily development?
Those were multifamily townhomes there. Those particular ones I mentioned were townhomes.
Is there some kind of tie to that development where corporations can't come in and buy the whole lot and rent them out? Do they have to be owner occupants?
Right. They're approval by the state and then their approval from us as well ties them to the folks that actually have the projects that have to carry it through. I've actually had one of those guys call me in the last week here and say, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to make this deadline because it's gotten so strange as far as the paperwork and the financing on it. I may have to wait until the next go round. But we did have a new developer add into it that has done affordable housing that says, hey, I think we want to compete for this. And once they're given that approval and committed, I don't think the state lets them off the hook for that. It has to be them and not something they pass on to someone else. So.
Okay.
Richard, this is Sherry Argabright. Is that affordable housing just for large projects, or could it be a small builder wanting to build a single family home and just have it in an affordable range and somehow qualify for that program? Or
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know that, it's a good question, Sherry, but I don't know that they're going, one, if they're a small builder, they're probably not have to worry about the allocation as much because of maybe either existing lot status or, just not having as many lots. But, if they wanted to compete under the sewer allocation because they needed more lots, they certainly could. Again, that's whatever project, it wouldn't have to be a big builder, no, if that answers your question.
okay, yes, it does. And so, and the likelihood of them needing to compete and fall into that category of affordable housing may not be there, like you said, if they're just working with one lot or a small bill or small
Right.
area.
Right.
Okay, great.
And quite frankly, if they have just a handful of lots that falls in that less than 20 category, they may want to compete just for infill and not tie themselves to affordable, even though that's an option. Affordable kind of, it's a typical, when you're dealing with federal funds on it, state funds on it, you got a lot of things you'll have to meet categorically to, paperwork, I guess is the best way for me to describe that. So you end up having to do a lot more hoops than you would if you're just competing on a regular basis and still trying to offer affordable housing.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
So this is Melissa, and I had a question, sorry, a little bit ago that I was the one that was talking about a kitty. My neighbor pulled up, so apologize for that. Wasn't on mute. She lost her cat. So the property that we have listed down there off of Lane Street onto Old Concord Salisbury Road, it's the farmland. You've got water and sewer connections that are right there at Lane Street and then down there at Camp Julia, but you can't run it out. And you just told us that, the capacities.
Melissa, are you there? Did we lose you? Did we lose everybody? Oh, come on.